What sounds like fiction, but is actually a real historical event. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell to never miss a video. When King Edward I was young, before he was king, he was a prisoner of Simon de Montfort during a civil war. During his captivity he asked to ride the horses at the castle, where he was being held. He proceeded to ride them one by one, tiring them all out. When it came to the last horse he mounted, bade his captors farewell and rode away. All of the other horses were too tired to give effective chase. Vesna Vulovic fell from a height of 10,160 meters and lived. She holds the world record for surviving the highest fall without a parachute.
I have been falling for 30 minutes!
Return of Napoleon. An army was sent to intercept him, and they ended up fighting for him. If it was shown in a movie, most people would have considered it cheesy and unrealistic. The rise and fall of Alexander the Great. Never lost a battle in his life, conquered the whole known world, and only stopped because his soldiers were tired. The Persian leader Cambyses II used cats to defeat an Egyptian army. He had his soldiers paint cats on their shields and brought hundreds of cats and other animals that the Egyptians held sacred to the front lines. The Egyptians refused to fight the cat army and were easily defeated because of it. In 1504, a German imperial knight lost his hand to a cannon shot which forced his sword against him. He lived, pretty amazing for that time, and instead of, stopping with fighting and living the rest of his life in peace, he had an iron hand forged. Some Jamie Lannister shit. Let me repeat that. This had an iron hand prosthetic over 500 years ago. He continued fighting for 40 years, after which he chilled in the castle of Hornburg for his final years. His name was Gods of the Iron Hand, and the hand itself is still at display. The Japanese kamikaze Divine Wind that saved the country from an amphibious invasion by the Mongolian hordes. The Mongols captured a foothold on some outlying Japanese islands and started to attack the mainland. The Japanese army pushed them back, and they had to retreat to China. When they did, a typhoon ravaged their navy and sank their ships. The Mongolians, probably reasonably, seeing this as a fluke, decided to rebuild and attack again. 7 years later, unfortunately for them, the Japanese fortified their coastline. After basically months of sailing around seeking a place to land, another typhoon struck their fleet and destroyed them. There would be no third invasion.
Now comes the part where we throw our heads back and laugh. Ready?
Ready!
In 2007, a piraglida got trapped in the updraft of 2 joining thunderstorms and lifted to an altitude of 10 kilometers. She landed 3.5 hours later about 60 kilometers north of her starting position, having survived extreme cold, lightning and lack of oxygen. There was one person who survived the sinking of not only the Titanic, but also the Titanic's 2 sister ships, the Britannic and the Olympic. Okay, not a big fan of editing comments, but I'm going to because this got bigger than expected. Said person is Violet Jessup, and the Titanic and Britannic were indeed sunk, and the Olympic collided with a British warship, but did not sink. The Glasgow Ice Cream Wars. 6 people died in a turf war over ice cream van routes. They were dealing heroin out of the vans. A Chinese emperor once ran in circles around a pillar to escape an assassin. He survived. Fun fact. One of the assassins who attempted to assassinate Archduke Franz Ferdinand threw a grenade, but missed the Archduke's car. He swallowed cyanide and jumped in the river Miljacka. The cyanide was old and did not work, and the river was only 10 centimeters deep. He was captured seconds later. Check out the CIA's assassination attempts on Castro. Some highlights include planting a bomb in a large seashell and then painting it bright colors and placing it on the ocean floor in hopes Castro would see it while swimming and pick it up. Exploding cigars. Poisoned cigars that were supposed to be given to Castro, but were instead given to an unknown individual. Spraying Castro's broadcasting station with LSD. Poisoning Castro's shoes so that his beard would fall out. poisoning a chocolate milkshake. Only the pills froze together in the freezer and shattered before they could be placed in the shake. Contaminating a diving suit with a toxic fungus and giving it to Castro, only for the man set to deliver the suit to decide to give him a higher quality diving suit, a ballpoint pen with a very fine hypodermic needle. The Great Stink of London in 1858. One summer the heat dried up the River Thames, where all the human waste went, and an unbearable smell pervaded throughout the entire city. All Parliament representatives were eventually coerced out of their homes outside of London to convene and solve the issue. Much to the citizens' glee, Parliament was held in their building on the bank of the River Thames, resulting in one of the fastest Parliament decisions ever made to reform the London sewer system. The London beer flood of 1814. When one vat of beer at Mutes & Co. brewery exploded, it proceeded to cause a domino effect of other vats to also burst, causing a tidal wave that flooded the neighborhood, leaving crumbled homes in its path as well as 8 people dead and dozens injured. The many defenestrations of Prague. Starting a war by throwing diplomats out the window is almost straight out of 300. There were a few Japanese soldiers who refused to surrender after World War II and remained on duty in the rainforest for 30 years after the war ended. During World War I, the Germans sent Lenin back to Russia in a sealed train, calling him the most dangerous weapon that they had. During World War II, Polish army conscripted a bear. During World War I, Christmas 1914, the British and German forces on the Western Front unofficially made a ceasefire without the authorization of their superiors in order to celebrate, trade goods, and play football. Also during World War I, the Russian and German armies in Poland stopped fighting each other in order to fight off an enormous pack of wolves that had been attacking both armies. During the First World War, navies from different countries hired artists to paint crazy patterns on their ships in order to throw off the aim of enemy U-boats. The last time Liechtenstein went to war was the Austro-Prussian War. The fact that sounds like fiction is that they were forced to send 80 soldiers and came back with 81. They made a friend in the form of an Austrian liaison officer. The town of Rothenburg auf der Tauber in Germany, one of the country's oldest and most preserved cities. Essentially during the 30 Years' War, the Catholic army wanted to destroy the town because they resisted the church. Count von Tilly, sounds like a Monty Python name, was going to destroy the town, but as a gesture of peace the town offered him a mass, 3.25 L, of local wine. He declared that, if anyone in the town could drink the mass of wine in one go, he would spare the town and move on. Then someone just walked up and did it. So the army left. Paddy Roy Bates, the founding king of Zealand, had his country, a small naval platform, invaded and his son Michael taken hostage by Dutch and German mercenaries. They came in riding jet skis, speedboats, and helicopters while he was in England buying groceries. He hired a helicopter, came down a rope with a shotgun, reconquered Zealand and took the mercenaries hostage. An official German diplomat was sent to negotiate the release of the ringleader. Some guy in Australia decided he wanted to hunt rabbits, but rabbits don't live in Australia. So then he released like 12 in his backyard and now there's a ton of rabbits in Australia. Similar thing happened with goats. TL. 3 goats turned into 5,250,000 on an island. So they went in and killed them all. It's crazy, but this video by Real Life Law talks about it. Edit. To clear things up, the island had a lot of animals not found anywhere else that were starving due to the goats eating all their food. Edit 2. So turns out it was actually 250,000 goats, not 500,000. Edit 3. This wasn't Australia. In the 1800s there were street vendors in Egypt who sold ancient Egyptian mummies. Just lined them up on a street corner and sold them like they were umbrellas on a rainy day. English tourists would buy them to display as oddities. A Finnish soldier who managed to escape capture after losing his squad in a methed up hallucination. Being the doctor of the group, he was carrying the meth pills for the whole squad, and in order to survive and escape his pursuers he took the whole pill box, 30 pills, when the allowed dosage for a grown man was 1. He survived in the Soviet wilderness for 2 weeks eating only pine butts, and one time a Siberian jay that he caught and ate raw. When he was rescued he was 45 kilograms and had a resting heart rate of 200 BPM.
Capture fish, so juicy, sweet.
The marathon at the 1904 Olympics in St. Louis. The first place finisher did most of the race in a car. He had intended to drop out and got a car back to the stadium to get his change of clothes and just kind of started jogging when he heard the fanfare. The second place finisher was carried across the finish line, legs technically twitching, by his trainers. They had been refusing him water and giving him a mixture of brandy and rat poison for the entire race. Doping wasn't illegal yet, and this was a terrible attempt at it, so he got the gold when the first guy was revealed. Third finisher was unremarkable, somehow. Fourth finisher was a Cuban mailman who had raised the funds to attend the Olympics by running non-stop around his entire country. He landed in New Orleans and promptly lost all of the traveling money on a riverboat casino. He ran the race in dress shoes and long trousers, cut off at the knee by a fellow competitor with a knife. He probably would have come in first, well, second, behind the car, had it not been for the hour nap he took on the side of the track after eating rotten apples he found on the side of the race. 9th and 12th finishers were from South Africa and ran barefoot. South Africa didn't actually send a delegation. These were students who just happened to be in town and thought it sounded fun. 9th was chased a mile off course by angry dogs. Note, these are the first Africans to compete in any modern Olympic event. Half the participants had never raced competitively before. Some died. St. Louis only had one water stop on the entire run. This, coupled with the dusty road and exacerbated by the cars kicking up dust, lead to the above fatalities. And yet, somehow, rat poison guy survived to get the gold. The Russian delegation arrived a week late because they were still using the Julian calendar in 1904.
Now comes the part where we throw our heads back and laugh. Ready?
Ready!
You forgot the worst bit, that they only had one water stop on purpose, because the official running things wanted to study dehydration. In 1956 a man named Tommy Fitzpatrick stole a small plane from New Jersey for a bet, and then landed it perfectly on the narrow street in front of the bar he had been drinking at in Manhattan. 2 years later, he did it again after someone didn't believe he had done it the first time. Operation Paul Bunyan. To summarize, some Americans were killed by the North Korean military while cutting down a tree in the Korean DMZ. In response to this, to show the North Koreans that you don't fuck with the United States, America went back to finish cutting down the tree with a little bit of backup firepower to help keep them safe. Specifically, America and South Korea sent a convoy of 23 vehicles and about 140 men, armed with rifles, grenade launcher, vehicle-mounted chain guns, chainsaws, some with suicide vests, some with axes and taekwondo training. They had 27 helicopters circling behind them, 7 of which were attack helicopters. They had B-52s flying overhead, escorted or accompanied by F-4s, F-5s, F-86s, and F-111s, all of which were armed and ready to engage. They moved a carrier offshore. Just behind the border, they had full infantry, artillery, and armor divisions standing by. All this, just to chop down a tree, and to send a message, of course. That's all folks, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. Make sure to leave a like, and subscribe, if you enjoyed the video.